the word which came to Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, arise and go down to the potter's house, and there I will cause you to hear my words. Now, I want to stop there just for a moment because it's kind of an interesting play on words. We think about it. It says, I got a word for you, Jeremiah, and then I want you to go down to the potter's house, and then I've got words for you. I've got a message for you. And it's this idea that Jeremiah, the message I want to share with you, to share with the people of God, you can't hear and you can't get by just staying right where you're at. Like, you're actually going to have to take a step. You're actually going to have to move. Like, I've got a word for you, but you're not going to get the full glimpse. You're not going to get the full picture as long as you stay right here. You've got to take a step towards there. And isn't that so true when how God speaks into our lives, gives vision into our lives, is that you've got to be willing to take a step. And, so often, a lot of times people are like, man, I wish God would give me a fresh revelation, a new vision, a new perspective when it comes to my life. And I sometimes wonder how many times God is sitting there saying, you know what? I'll give you that new picture. I'll give you that new vision if you just be willing to walk in obedience and take that step, that last step that I actually showed you to take. To actually take a step to move from here to there. Because so often, when it comes to discovering, I think, God's direction and God's vision in our lives, it oftentimes, for some of us, it starts with just taking that last step that you knew God clearly wanted you to take, but for whatever reason you chose not to take. Anyone ever had one of those steps? Where it's like you knew, just from God's word, maybe an impression on your heart, maybe confirmation through other believers, that you knew that there was a step you had to take. A call, a person he wanted you to call and make contact with, maybe someone he wanted you to forgive, maybe a step of faith he was calling you to step out in. But for whatever reason, maybe fear, maybe trepidation, you chose to not take it. And listen, I'm telling you, if you want to step into a new revelation, new vision for your life, for some of you, it starts with just going back to that last step that you clearly saw, you clearly knew he wanted you to take, and just taking that step. See, so often we want future revelation without present obedience. But you got to take a step. Vision comes when you step from here to go there. Some revelation, I put on my notes this way, some revelation requires relocation. You got to get up and move. I like how it says it in Proverbs when speaking of the Word of God, describes it as a lamp unto our feet, a light unto our path. It's a beautiful imagery because a lamp, it only goes so much distance. It only illuminates so far. So if you want to see the steps in front of you, you want to see a vision in front of you, you've actually got to move. And when you take a step, it's funny how it starts to illuminate another step, and then another step, and then another step, but you've got to take a step. And so for some of you, it starts with going back and taking that step that you knew was a step God called you to take, but for whatever reason, you chose to ignore it. And so, again, we've got this vision of Jeremiah, and Jeremiah is called to move from here to there, to go to the potter's house. And that's what we see in verse 3. He takes a step and says, then I went down to the potter's house, and there he was, making something at the wheel. And I love this verse because there's really, I think, three things. If we're going to get a bigger vision, a bigger view of God's vision and God's purpose as it plays out in our lives, the process it oftentimes unfolds in our life, there's these three things that we've got to, I think, pull out of this passage that help give us a greater perspective. And the first is just the potter's presence. Notice, you see, the potter's presence. For the very first thing, when Jeremiah steps into this potter's house, what's the first thing he notices? He doesn't notice all the supplies. He doesn't notice all the pots. He doesn't notice the paintbrushes. He doesn't notice all the tools. No, it says that when he saw the potter in there, it says there he was. He noticed the potter's presence. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I think it's so important that we get it because really that's my prayer for each and every one of us. When we come into here on a Saturday night, really my prayer for us as a church is that we would be a place that when people come in, the very first thing they encounter is God's presence. That there's a sense of there he was. before me. In worship, there he was. In the message, there he was. Because, listen, there's some of us, we're facing situations that, listen, 7 steps to a better life or 7 steps to a better marriage isn't quite enough to actually overcome that. You need an encounter with God's presence. You need a move of God's presence, a move of the Spirit in your life. If you ever have a hope to be able to see a light at the end of the tunnel in some of your situations and some of your circumstances and some of your struggles. And listen, I share this because sometimes I worry that we can do this whole church thing and people can come in and they can see us but not see him. And they see the pots but they don't see the potter. And the danger with this is that the pot can't help you. The pot can't save you. That the pot can't heal you, only the potter can. Like we can greet and we can we can be amazing ushers, but at the end of the day, the usher can't help you, but the one they're ushering you to can. You know, at the end of the day, we can sing these songs and listen, the songs can be great, but the songs we're singing, they can't deliver you, but the one we're singing about can. You know, I can come up here and I can try to inspire you and get you motivated to go and walk in faith. But listen, this preacher, again, I can't save you. I can't deliver you. But the one I'm preaching about can. And so for some of you, that's where it starts. You got to have an encounter with God's presence, right? God's presence. And that's where it begins. And so we see this hey guys, come on in, grab a seat. And so we see this picture, right? This picture of the potter and Jeremiah walking in. He's got this vision and he comes in and again, the most prominent thing he sees is the presence of God. There he was. There he was. But here's the other thing we see is we also see the potter's process. The potter's process. Get this in verse 3. It says, there he was making something at the wheel. There he was making something at the wheel. There's a lot of elements to the process we go through in following Jesus, but I love this phrase because it really kind of unpacks a little bit what this process really starts to look like for us. It unpacks it in a couple ways. One we see is the process is dark. When it comes to making this pottery, the process is dark. God's process of unveiling a vision, purpose in our life, it can sometimes be very dark. In fact, we see this in verse 3. It says there he was making something. Notice that there's a little bit of activity and ambiguity. Like he can't see. Maybe it's because of how he's, I don't know, in the house. Maybe it's perspective, where he's at. Or maybe it's just dark. And for whatever reason, he can't see fully what's being made. He just knows something's being made. Something's being formed. And really, when it comes to God's purpose in our lives, isn't that how it works in our lives as well? Sometimes that process can be very dark. Sometimes dark just because of our own choosing, right? In fact, I remember when I used to do youth camps, and I remember I did this summer camp for a bunch of junior high kids, and I did tug of war game. I thought, man, nothing's, that's pretty safe. How can anyone get injured on a tug of war game, right? And so I lined them up, and there's probably like 50 on one side, 50 on another, and they start going at it. They start pulling each different direction, and typically in tug of war, it seems like there's always like one side that dominates the other, but not this time. Like for some reason, like it was a stalemate. Like it just stopped. Like it just, no side was really dominating the other. And so here's where the problem came in. As I'm looking at this, I'm like, there's just something not right about this picture. And I realized that the rope I'd use, you should probably use like a thick tug of war rope. Well, I was on a fixed budget as a youth pastor, and so I settled on a rope that's probably about this big. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, something's just not right. And then all of a sudden, it just snaps. Sounds like a shotgun went off. I mean, it's loud. There's screaming and there's yelling. And so I run up there, and there's one kid in particular. He's screaming like his arm got cut off. And so I run over, I pick him up, and I start running him to the nurse station. And I love this. For some reason, as I'm running, in my mind, the whole time I'm going, don't look down, because I'm sitting there thinking, like, if I look down, I'm going to see guts, like, all over the place, like, exposed, like, intestines coming out, and this is it. Like, I lost my first kid as a youth pastor, and so I'm running them to the nursing station, like, don't look down, and all of a sudden, I get about halfway there, and the kid goes, you can put me down now. I'm okay. I'm okay. I think it was just the noise. It scared me. And I looked down, and he's like perfectly fine. And yet, I think sometimes we do the same thing when it comes to the process. Sometimes it's dark just because we choose it to be dark. We choose it to be dark. Because we sit there and it's like when it comes to that step that we know we're supposed to take, that we know we're supposed to act upon, we don't, because it scares us, it intimidates us. Maybe it's something we just really don't want to do. Again, maybe it's that decision to forgive somebody, or that call that we know that we need to make. So sometimes that darkness is from our own choosing. But sometimes the process is dark just because it's dark. Just because it's dark. I mean, that's the interesting thing, is that I think God understood something that sometimes we don't maybe always understand, or certainly he understood something that I think definitely a potter would have understood, is that sometimes it's only in the darkness, when the light is less, that's in those seasons of darkness that actually it allows the clay to be most moldable, allows the clay to be most pliable, allows the clay to actually be formed, because it holds in the most moisture. It's when it's the most, just moldable and shapeable. And listen, so part of the reason I think that we see this picture and this reminder that the process is dark is this reminder that if you want to step into God's vision, it takes walking by faith. When you look at all the great characters in the Bible, those who God did amazing things, extraordinary things, it was by faith, not by sight. It wasn't because they were the smartest, wasn't because they were the most gifted. In fact, you just read through Hebrews 11, you see this. It was by faith. This willingness to walk in the darkness, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it wasn't easy, even when it was difficult, even when they couldn't see necessarily where they were going. And so you see this dynamic of the potter and this tendency that oftentimes the process can be dark. But here's the other thing the process can be dizzying. Now, I love this aspect because here in the story, we see the process. Not only he knows there's something that's being made, he doesn't know exactly what's being made, but he goes on to say that it's being made on a wheel. And so to illustrate this, I was actually going to, I did some searching to try to find a real potter's wheel, and realized that was beyond my budget. It was like $700. So, but thank goodness for Amazon, because Amazon, for $20, I have the Pottery Cool 2000. So, yes, to illustrate this. So we're going to kind of do this. But while the process can be dark, and sometimes we don't know fully what's going on, we know that something's happening, something's being made in the process, even though we can't fully understand it, fully grasp it. The process can also be very dizzying. Very dizzying. And I love this story, and this vision that Jeremiah's given, because it's so descriptive of so many of our lives. Like how many of you have ever felt like the clay going kind of around on this wheel, right? I mean, it's just, feel like you're just kind of going in circles, right? And of course, in this one, it's in a real pottery wheel. Now, it would have actually had a pedal. This one doesn't have a pedal. And, of course, in ancient times, it was basically like two wheels with an axle. And so, to get it to go, I mean, like, it took real talent, because you had to kind of kick as you're, like, forming it. I can't even imagine how that would work. Ours, thankfully, is battery operated. But this is how our life feels. Like, I don't know, I feel like I'm waiting for, like, Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore to, like, show up. So some of you are too old to even realize that, but I know that story. But just kind of it keeps going. And that's how the process can work. It can feel like, we just keep spinning and we keep spinning, and it can get so exhausting and gets so overwhelming and can get really discouraging. In fact, kind of show you why it can get so discouraging. I need a volunteer. Actually, Sherry, why don't you come on? I already pre-volunteered you earlier in the week at youth group. So, but you're going to be the potter. I'm going to be the clay. So I want you to stand here, face me. All right, you are the potter. All right. So often what happens, a reason so many of us, we feel so discouraged and we feel so defeated. Life just, sometimes it just feels like this nonstop. I'm going in circles, feeling like I'm getting nowhere, is because oftentimes our lives, perspective-wise, look like this. Like the weekend, we show up here Saturday, Sunday, and we're like, Jesus, if you're for me, who can be against me? And we're worshiping God, we're rejoicing. And then Monday comes. And Monday's like, I don't know, what happened to you, God? Like, where did you go? I don't know what's going on. Then Tuesday rolls around. I'm like, man, I'm not sure if I can make it through this. This is not what I planned. This is not where I thought my life was going to go. It's not how I thought the week was going to go. Wednesday, God, why have you forsaken me? Where are you at? And Thursday and Friday, Saturday, like, I'm not going to make it. I don't understand. And then Saturday, thank you, Jesus. You're here. You weren't here the rest of the week, but you're here now. And then we kind of go through the process again. Hey, let's give it up for Sherry. Well done. So, but that's what so many of our weeks look like, And again, it comes back to this perspective thing. It's just our perspective is in the wrong moment. Our perspective is all about the stuff around us. In fact, it's very interesting. The wheel was actually very descriptive, imagery-wise in Hebrew of circumstances. This word known as circumstance. In fact, circumstance is a Latin word made up of two root words. Circum, which means circle, or just kind of the thing sort of around, and stance, which means to stand. And it was literally a military term. And it was used to kind of describe a lot of battle patterns. When an army would seek to invade a city or take over people, they would oftentimes encircle them. They would surround them. And so often, I think the reason so many of us, we get discouraged and we feel so defeated and we feel so exhausted is because our perspective is constantly on all the things around us. And so just every once in a while, we get a glimpse of the potter. But most of the time, our perspective is dominated on all the issues, all the struggles, all the opposition, all the things against us that are around us. But listen, what if instead of always looking out at all the issues, what if instead of looking out, you learn to look up? Like you look up, because listen, if you looked up, I'm telling you, what you come to find is you'd see a potter. You'd see our Father who's got his hands on the wheel. He's got his hands who's shaping you, who's molding you, who's directing you. See, the interesting thing is that when you're going in circles, so often when you go through circles, and when we say like that, when we say that expression, I feel like I'm spinning my wheels. Really, the truth is what this picture reminds us of is oftentimes it's when I feel like my life is just going in circles and getting nowhere. That's actually where God's doing his greatest work. It's in those moments of spinning and going through the mundane and going through the routine and going through what seems like just emotions. Listen, it's in those moments that God oftentimes is forming me and shaping me and molding me into the person he created me to be and you to be most. It's in those moments. If we can learn to look up and see the potter whose hand is upon us, who's shaping us and molding us, rather than always looking out at all the circumstance and all the situation and all the discouragement and the issues around us. If we learn to look up, I'm telling you, you'd start to see a whole lot more purpose in your pain. Start to see a whole lot more purpose in your struggle. You'd start to see a whole lot more purpose in your struggle and situation and circumstance. See, put in my notes this way: God oftentimes loves to use seasons, cycles, and circumstances of life to shape us. He loves to use those seasons and circumstances to shape us. See, and this is tough for us because when it comes to God's plan for our lives, we like the straight line. We like to go from A to B, just straight line. straight line it. That's, get there as fast as I can. Problem is, though, is God oftentimes likes curvy things. God oftentimes likes to take us the roundabout way. In fact, we see this Exodus 13:18. It says, so God led them in a roundabout way through the wilderness. Roundabout way. Why? Because, listen, just like the people of Israel, God was trying to shape them, try to mold some things, develop some things, that until those things were developed in their life, they couldn't ever step into and grab hold of the promise. And the same goes in your life. There's some things that he's trying to shape in you and mold in you and form in you before your destiny can become a reality in your life. And listen, if you're going to ever experience that and actually see that come to reality and come to fruition, you got to learn to look up and see the potter's hands forming you, even when sometimes life feels like it's just going in circles. Listen, he's trying to shape you. See, sometimes God doesn't change your circumstances because ultimately he's trying to change you. He's trying to change you. But here's something else that's interesting too about this potter's wheel is that speed also plays a part in the formation of this pot as well. On this, it's got a couple different speeds. It's got like slow and medium, and then fast, right? And the reason for this is that the potter would have understood this, and this is sometimes really